Cathedral. An important moment not just for the royal family, but for the United Kingdom in general. The Queen's coffin was dressed with the Royal Standard of Scotland and flowers from Balmoral Castle as the Royal Company of Archers accompanied that hearse, along with, of course, the Queen's 4 children, King Charles and his siblings, Princess Anne, Prince Edward, and Prince Andrew. I want to bring in ABC News royal contributor Omid Scobie for a little bit more on this. And Omid, to see this family in mourning, the Queen's 4 children walking behind the hearse, 3 of them in military uniform, Prince Andrew not in uniform but wearing his military medals. What's the weight of this moment for the United Kingdom?
Well, I think this is one of the first times we really get to join the Queen's children in this moment. Of course, we're seeing this footage, this procession. I don't need to point out how silent it is there. I mean, the respect that I think people have come out in their thousands to show, not just for the Queen, but also to offer that support to her mourning children. Of course, the 4 of them walking side by side, no hierarchy there. Of course, he is King Charles III, but he stands alongside his siblings in that moment. And I think it's a chance for us to see them in their grief. But this is a long walk. I mean, the energy that's required for something like this, it takes half an hour to move from the Queen's original spot to the cathedral. And I think there's a heightened emotion there, one that we won't see much of over the days ahead. Of course, Charles has been working very much in his capacity as the monarch. Yesterday was a full day of engagements. He comes here today wearing both roles, the crown and, of course, that role as the son. And I think we see that in their faces today. It's, as we've seen for Princess Anne, it's been a particularly difficult couple of days, having obviously been part of that procession yesterday, that's 6 hours coming from Aberdeen to Edinburgh, and then joining this again. She, of course, has her husband, Sir Admiral Tim Lawrence, behind her, so there is that support. But I think many people today are really thinking of her. They know she was there, of course, for those final moments with the Queen. They're there to show their support. And I think, as you can see from the crowds in Edinburgh, people really want to do their absolute best and most to honour the life of the Queen and also be there for the children of.
It does appear that way. And we had, of course, that moment that made rounds around the world with with Princess Anne, rather, curtsying to her mother's coffin. Yeah. At the first sight of it over the weekend. Our Lindsay Davis is there in Edinburgh. And Lindsay, you described that silence. You said you can almost hear a pin drop because of that silence. But I thought it interesting that it's not just people from Scotland who have assembled there. You say you're seeing people from all over the world.
Right. You know, this couple from America who happened to be in town and saying that they've never witnessed anything this historic. Pardon me if I keep kind of peeking around. I think we're just starting to see the procession reach this point just about here at St. Giles Cathedral. Again, this is about a 3/4 of a mile walk. They're certainly taking their time. People around here taking it in. Of course, it's so quiet. You can hear the shutter flash of the cameras around, but people for the most part, and you have kids in this crowd included, but you don't hear any crying or anything. I mean, it's a parade-like atmosphere by the looks of how you have people lining and crowding the cobblestone here, but it's just so quiet. People just really solemn, somber, silent, as they're really observing. I mean, you see people looking and watching in a really pensive manner. You know, of course, this service inside the cathedral is going to be about remembrance and Thanksgiving, and it seems that is the mood of the crowd here, one of remembrance at this point.
And I want to bring in ABC News foreign correspondent James Longman on that point. James, I was moved when you said that as a Brit yourself, that you were surprised at how much emotion you felt at the Queen's passing. And that's a sentiment that I've heard from so many people here in England, as the Queen represented not only the monarchy, but also identity and family memories for so many who identify those family members with the Queen. Can you talk a little bit about just what this represents, so much more than just one person, but also as a national identity?
Absolutely. Look, Diane, a lot of people in this country absolutely love the monarchy. You're seeing many of them lined up there today. There will be many out here for all the events over the next few days. We know there are people in this country who adore the Queen and everything that she represents. And of course, for them, it's a huge loss. For many of those people, it feels like a member of the family has died. There are lots of people in this country who are fairly ambivalent about monarchy, who aren't really bothered either way, who say things like, well, I don't really mind about the monarchy, but I know I love the Queen. And for them, I feel like there might be a kind of sense of unease. They've been destabilized in some way. They're not sure why they feel the way they feel, but they feel something, because she was much more than a monarch. She was the rock on which modern Britain was built. She was monarch through a period where, 80% of Brits have never known another monarch. And so she's just been kind of a force in our lives that we've just grown to just believe will always be there, almost like children. We just imagined she would last forever. And now we're going to have to unpick that somehow. We look around ourselves, there are signs of her everywhere. On our money, on our stamps. You will see around Britain the initials ER, Elizabeth Regina, and they're stamped on just about everything from our post boxes to, our lampposts. They're all going to have to change to CR, Charles Rex, Charles the King, and King Charles in Latin. So there's an unpicking of the psychology of the loss of this Queen, which I think we're not really clear on just how much of an impact that's going to have on us, whether or not we loved her. And it's certainly something I personally have been going through. I know my friends and family are feeling the same way. And so it's going to take us time to get through it. But I think it's going to be very moving over the next few days when we see the number of people who are going to come out and line the streets and hoping to see her lie in state. Because we're going to come together in the community that she built. And I'm hoping it'll be wonderful. I think it will be.
It's a sentiment that I'm certainly hearing seems to be spread far and wide here. And I see our royal contributor, Victoria Murphy, standing there next to you, James. So, Victoria, I want to bring you into this conversation as well, because this is not just a ceremony about the monarch as the head of state, but also as the head of the military. We see her 4 children, 3 of them dressed in their military uniforms. Prince Andrew not in uniform, but with his military medals, because the monarch, of course, in addition to being head of state, is also head of the armed forces. Can you talk about why that's such an important part of these ceremonies?
You're absolutely right, and I think what we're seeing kind of kick into play now is this Rick Coffin today in military uniform. He is in his uniform of Field Marshal, we're told. His siblings, Anne and Edward, also in military uniform to reflect the fact that they, as working royals, have honorary military appointments. However, Prince Andrew, because he stepped back as a working royal, we were informed earlier on today that he would not be wearing military uniform. He no longer holds any honorary military appointments. When we see the rest of the royal family at ceremonial events over the next few days, many will be in military uniform. We're also told alongside Prince Andrew, Prince Harry will not be wearing his military uniform either, as he is no longer a working royal. But you know what has really kind of struck me about where we are at the moment is that it feels as though we are very much now having a pause to reflect, because when the Queen's death was announced, there was so much shock. Everything felt so frantic, and there was so much activity that unfolded, so much of it centred around the new king and all of the things that had to happen in very quick succession following the Queen's death. And now it feels, since we have seen her coffin yesterday and again today, that actually this is kind of the moment where we start to slow down a little bit. We start to really kind of reflect on focusing on honouring her reign, even though we have already been propelled into the next one.
And I want to bring in ABC News foreign correspondent Maggie Rulli on that point, because, Maggie, you're there in Edinburgh watching this procession unfold. And I wonder if that's starting to sink in, because for the people who are there, they've now had a few days to kind of try to process and wrap their head around the loss of the Queen. But funerals often bring an opportunity for closure. And for so many who are there, this is their first chance to actually see the Queen's coffin and really fully understand the gravity of the moment. Does it feel like that's sinking in there right now?
For me, Diane, especially today, the image that is driving this historic moment home is one of the Queen's coffin with King Charles by her side. I mean, this was the first time we saw now King Charles standing beside the coffin of his mother, the Queen. And in this image, there's just so much weight. You can feel the emotion. Not only do you have a man standing next to the coffin of his mother. You can feel the grief, feel the loss that this family is going through. But you also have this image of transition. In this moment, you see the end of an era next to the beginning of a new era. And that's something we're feeling here today as well. This moment of change that's full of grief, full of heartache, full of pain. There is a dignity here of respect, but also of looking towards the future. Just moments before the procession happened behind us in Holyrood House, there was a ceremony of keys, a tradition that's very ancient here in Edinburgh, where the city essentially gives keys to the monarch. That's something that's happened for the past 70 years with the Queen. Today, for the first time, it happened with King Charles. So we're also looking towards the future today, Diane, as obviously we're looking towards the past.
And I want to go to Lindsay Davis, because Lindsay, it looks like the hearse is arriving outside St. Giles Cathedral, where you are. Can you describe
family right behind? Princess Anne, it's worth noting, will be with the coffin every step of this days-long journey, all the way until her resting place in London. Very quiet. Once again, I think that it cannot be overstated just how many people you have here, many people with raised arms right now as they're just trying to take just the right photo to kind of capture the history of it all. You see all the dignitaries getting out of their vehicles at this point, once again about to head into St. Giles Cathedral, which is of itself is a historic place constructed in 1152. This is going to be a service of thanksgiving and remembrance. Again, all of this would have been pre-approved, even the smallest of details, by the Queen in preparation that this day would happen. Now we see them standing before they approach and go into the cathedral. To the right, you have a representative of the Church of Scotland. In addition, a Catholic archbishop who have been standing guard at the door here of the cathedral all along this 3/4 of a mile walk that has taken just over 20 minutes really to arrive at this place, even maybe perhaps closer to 30 minutes to get here. And again, they will go inside where several songs, several hymns will be sung by the choir, several scriptures, in addition to prayers of wisdom and comfort for the royal family.
And once these ceremonies are done, what's happening inside the cathedral will primarily be for family, for dignitaries, for other leaders. But the Queen will then lie in state for 24 hours, where members of the public can come in, and that's their chance to pay their final respects. The security outside, as you can imagine, is tremendous throughout the city, but for those who are trying to attend, they can expect almost airport-level type security outside as they try to go in and do pay their respects to the Queen. And right now, we're seeing the Queen's coffin coming out of that hearse, and again, her children there guiding their mother on this final leg of her journey as the public says their farewell to Queen Elizabeth, along with her family. And Obed, if you could just walk us through the importance of the ceremonial aspects of what we're going to see and what we're seeing right now unfold today.
Absolutely. Well, we're about to see the keeper of the Palace of Holyrood House join that movement to carry the Queen into the chapel. This morning, Buckingham Palace actually shared this. We're also thinking about the children that she leaves behind. And we hear from the Dean during the service where he says, "God of mercy, we pray your comfort to all members of the royal family in their time of grief and loss. Enfold them in your love, we pray you. Uphold them in their sorrow and grant that they may be confident of your mercy." There'll be many moments like that throughout the service where we hear not just a love of the Queen, but also respect for the children that she leaves behind.
And Lindsay, they now have the coffin out of the hearse, and it looks like they're preparing to bring the Queen there into St. Giles Chapel.
Yes, we are awaiting this moment. Once again, the crowd basically standing at attention, as is the guard that is surrounding the hearse at this point. You know, many people, I think, feeling in much of the way that Prince Harry described in the States to the actual activity. So I see many of the faces looking this way, and people, again, eager to take their pictures, to capture this moment. As you see, again, more of the dignitaries walking into St. Giles Cathedral. We've seen in the last few days so much of the pomp and the pageantry along Buckingham Palace. Here it's a different sentiment. Again, just almost eerily quiet. Now as we watch her casket, her coffin go in to the cathedral with this military precision. Of course, all the officers in their kilts, quite typical Scottish attire. Once again, that casket draped in the flag of Scotland. Not too far away from her beloved Balmoral home, said to be her favorite home. Of course, where she spent summers and ultimately passed. All of this leading to the service of remembrance and thanksgiving in just a few minutes, we would imagine. As we really watch
what we're seeing unfold today. We sure are, Lindsay. And Omid, I wonder how much of what we're seeing unfold today was planned by the Queen herself, Omid?
Well, the Queen had a large hand. I mean, and it sounds morbid to say this, but she had a large hand in the planning of her own state funeral and, of course, in the events leading up to that. What we're about to see taking place here in the cathedral is the crown of Scotland being placed on top of the coffin. And again, it's another one of those reminders of this additional element of the protocol and procedures that are taking place before her coffin arrives here in London that signify the importance of Scotland during her reign and her to the people there. The congregation in this cathedral isn't just made up of dignitaries and officials, but it's also people from all sections of society. So you'll see representatives of faith leaders and also people from some of the organizations that she worked closely with. So this is, I guess, a small preview of what we'll see over the days ahead, but it's a real moment, a special moment, I think, signifying her love for Scotland and the love that they have for her.
And every detail of the ceremony that we see today was designed to highlight that special relationship between the Queen and Scotland, not only as part of the monarchy and part of the Commonwealth, but she also was part Scottish herself. She spent her summers there, as we've mentioned several times, and even the flowers on top of the coffin were chosen by the Queen from their home in Balmoral.
Yeah, exactly. There's the white heather in that wreath that came from the Balmoral estate. And we know that the Queen loved those hikes across a roaring estate surrounding her. You know, that was when she felt most at peace. It was a time when that heavy crown that she wore on her head, the burden that came with it, was eased for those summers. And the children that we saw walk in the procession behind her today, of course, they would often talk about Scotland being the one place that they had the Queen and Prince Philip as mum and dad for a few months.
And we will see the crown of Scotland placed on top of the coffin for this portion of the funeral ceremonies. How important is that to the people of Scotland watching this right now?
I think for a moment for the people of Scotland from all different backgrounds to have a moment that feels very much theirs before the Queen makes her journey to the rest of to England is incredibly special. It's also a moment where over the next 24 hours we'll see her lie in state, and that is very much something that gives people in Scotland a chance, and I'm sure that many might not even get that chance because the queues are expected to be very long, but they'll be able to funnel in and out of the cathedral to have a moment to pay their respects. But of course right now we see everyone in the streets of Edinburgh. There are tens of thousands of people, all who have watched this very long procession that has led up to this moment. An emotional moment, particularly for Princess Anne, who this is part of the sort of leg of a longer journey for her. Of course, she started that journey in Aberdeen following her mother's coffin to Edinburgh, and she'll continue that journey as the coffin moves on to London.
And we know that Princess Anne, along with now King Charles, were with the Queen there in Balmoral when she passed. So for Princess Anne, this really has been a continuous process, that she has been there right from the beginning. And we're now witnessing the ushers there, the pallbearers, putting the coffin there, ready for display, where it will then be graced with the crown of Scotland. And again, during the procession itself, we saw the Queen's 4 children, including King Charles, on foot behind the coffin. Other family members were in cars behind, but now that we're seeing the ceremony get started at St. Giles Cathedral, we do see some of the other royal family here as well.
Yes, exactly. Of course, Camilla, the Queen Consort, wasn't part of that procession on foot, but she did follow behind in the car. We saw her paying her respects as they entered into the cathedral. They now, of course, watch the moment that the minister of St. Giles Cathedral takes over and conducts the service.
And again, once the ceremony, we can see the King there with the Queen Consort right next to him. Again, all 4 of the Queen's children, or 3 of the 4, in military uniform. Prince Andrew not in military uniform, but he does have his military medals on him. A reminder that the sovereign is not only head of state, but also head of the armed services here in the UK. They are starting to take their seats and getting ready for this ceremony to begin. But this is just the beginning of what will be a long farewell to Queen Elizabeth. After the ceremony at St. Giles Cathedral, she will lie in state here for 24 hours as members of the public are able to come through and bid their final farewell. What is that scene going to be like, Omid?
Well, I think throughout this service we're going to see the emotion on the faces of the children of the Queen. Of course, each one of them had a different relationship with her. Of course, we had confirmation from Prince Andrew's office yesterday that he and wife Sarah, the Duchess of York, will be taking reign or looking after her 2 dogs moving forwards. And alongside that, they shared some details of the walks that they would take on the Windsor estate together, particularly during the COVID quarantine. So I think for each of these, for today, for each child, they'll be reminiscing some of those many moments. But of course, it's a reminder that the role that they play in the story moving forward continues to be important. Princess Anne, although 16th in line to the throne, will play a bigger role alongside Charles in this reign, because of course he dreamed of a slimmed-down monarchy. It's happening right now.
All right, well, we're taking a look at that ceremony beginning here at St. Giles Cathedral. Again, that crown of Scotland now about to be placed on the Queen's coffin as Scotland starts this process of the United Kingdom saying their formal farewell to what for many people here in the United Kingdom is the only monarch they've ever known. And now I want to go back to Phil Lipoff.
Now set to pay their respects to Queen Elizabeth. Stay with us.